Hello, and welcome to episode 147 of Prose. This week, prepare for war with the man many called Jolly Ole St. Nick. You heard correctly. Only one short story today amid the tumult that is the prose holiday season. Still, I think this one will be a great listen for the waning of the Yuletide. While you listen, please consider heading to prosepodcast.com, our one-stop shop for all things prose. There you can find links to social media, the episodes, a shop for some swag, the show's Patreon, and much more. Thanks for listening. Let's get to the tale, shall we? This week, we have Toy Box Keep, Part 1 in the Yuletide Wars. Enjoy. The Yuletide Wars. Part 1. Toy Box Keep.
You know why they sainted him, right?
What?
Them fish people. The ones that eat their god's body. You know why the Christkin canonized him, no?
Something about all that giving he does? Some such.
No. Miser be praised. Something beyond his idiocy on Yuletide. He's supposedly pieced together some children that had been butchered in some village in a different age.
He got the power of the Christ? He can resurrect?
That's the tale, Grayskin. Who knows if his meaty human fists can bring on the resurrection, though? Restore life and all that. Sounds like Christkin fables and tall tales, does it not?
Ah, my friends. I fear you shan't learn the truth of that tale tonight. Tonight you'll learn that I hold in my meaty human fists the power of doom, of justice, of death.
Grayskin, we must flee! It's Santa Claus himself, we must—
With that, Twilight Fleetfoot, who is the Klaus, Dean Sinterklaas, Christkin, dubbed St. Nicholas, threw himself into the two goblins. It took only 2 strikes of his great red copper and white gold enameled mace, one left and backhand and then back right and forehand, to lay low those 2 fiends that had been creeping far too close to the keep on surreptitious errands for the miser. How they had ever hoped to spy on Toy Box Keep, as Fleetfoot's great fortress was derisively called by those who embraced darkness, he would never know. Fleetfoot had long ago embraced the moniker for his home, and he loved the joy it now brought the peoples of the far, unknown north. He had wandered the world for millennia. Long before he pledged fealty to his longtime master who had been born in Bethlehem, he had enjoyed the sprawl of the earth, giving gifts even back then. Clay tablets, wheat sheafs, seeds of new and burgeoning plant stock, better harnesses to ease the burden of the oxen when plowing fields, smoother throwers for the spears of the hunters. After his master had been born, he took on the mantle of bishop and served as a shepherd of his flock. He had fallen in love with the ostentatiousness of Byzantium. He had sipped strong coffee and eaten delicacies not known to him in his Christendom youth with the Ottomans. The Greek Isles would always hold a place in his heart. But he was of the North in the end. Fleetfoot had gathered so many names, too many names through the ages. Long after he had given gifts in secrecy, after he had worked to bless the men and women along the Mediterranean, he had found even more of himself in the hinterlands. He had never thought that, after his calling from God, that he could ever find more joy in this life on the mortal coil. With the power of the Christ, the Father, and the unbound Spirit coursing through his veins, his even more elongated life and his ultra-powerful self lingered beyond the purpose that he had once found in his bishopric and his priesthood. As the world shrank and became envenomed, Nicholas, as he was called back then, traveled to deeper forests and colder climates. He might be an extremely powerful, benevolent being, older than Christianity, that refused to give in to cynicism and the darkness of the changing world, but he was not immune to the rising poison. Fleetfoot finally stopped in the Arctic, where all color and warmth was leached from the world. There, in a land with very few humans, he found that he could commune with the fauna of the ice and the snows. The small winter elves became his fast friends. They taught him to sustain himself without hunting. Fleetfoot could no longer brook the killing of a beast, no matter his hunger or need. Too many years of killing when he was obsessed with the hunt had marked him. The Gauls and the Britons and so many other peoples had worshipped him under many of his names then. They reveled in death and killing. Centuries of that, after being a healer, made sense then. But Fleetfoot saw it as the great stain on his service to the living beings of the world. Looking back, if he had to draw a line when the hunt became unpalatable to him, he most often thought back to the Teutoburg. He howled and inspired the slaughter of Varus's legions there among the trees. He was a beast himself. After that day in the Germanic forests, the hunt was never the same for him. From time to time, the elves and the Sami peoples and their distant cousins of the northern reaches would ask him to hold mass, which he would happily do. He knew neither believed as the Christkin of his past life did, but they did seem to find solace in the rituals. Moreover, Mass seemed to bring wardings against some of the fouler beings of the north. Trolls, goblins, wraiths, wendigos, wights, and even fouler beings of shadow crept along the ice most nights, and they could not tolerate the holy man's intoning the word of God. He wasn't there long before he realized that he had to build a fortified place to keep himself and those he now considered his people safe. Elf and Sami alike came together to assist the Klaus. They carved great chunks of granite and gneiss. The elves used their magics to fuse the blocks. Fleetfoot prayed as he used his bulk and divinely amplified strength to help with the construction. The result was a sprawling walled city they called Rauho it Usaluye, at the center of which was the fortress they rightfully called Lenoitus, or the Citadel. In the end, then, the dark beasts of the north dubbing the place Toybox Keep not long after its construction was a favor to Fleetfoot. He had trouble with the language of the Sami, and the human tongue is not fit to speak Elvish, even when it is sown with powers of the Christ. Fleetfoot had not known that his people were going to construct a surprise there in the heart of the keep. Against his wishes and against his requests, they had built him a master hall. He had been among them and building for at least 5 years, which meant that 5 Novembers' worth of donations from the Poro, at the arrangement of the king of the herd, left the hall bedecked in shed antlers and pelts. What caught the eye, even amidst the natural servine beauty of what came to be called the Hall of Horns, was the enormous throne his people had built him as a gift. It was their desire to have him be their king, which made Fleetfoot cringe. Yet, the throne was a thing of artistry and whimsy in a place so often left to naught but darkness. His peoples had heard the tales from all across the world of the wandering Klaus who gave gifts in secret, never asking for anything in return. They had heard of his penchant for giving those gifts to children in particular, and they had seen firsthand now how deft he was at creating toys in a flash for any child with whom he came into contact. So they had built him a great throne of toys. Little dolls, shiny metal birds, colorful blocks. The cushions on the seat and back and armrests were velveteen rabbits, stuffed bears, and other soft trinkets. Baubles and jewels that were meant for a little girl's playthings that would then become her dowry. They were put into the throne and made it sparkle, as most thrones did. A throne of toys made Fleetfoot laugh when they revealed all this to him, even amid his trepidation about all this king talk. As his time in the north flew, as time is wont to do, they all realized that the walls they had built were actually well nigh impregnable. Their combined efforts had magnified their power. The magics of the elves, the Christ, the herd, and all the others that had come together to imbue the place with such strength, because the loopholes of any one magic seemed to cover those blind spots of another. The matrix of magic was all but unassailable. Such a beacon of joy and giving could not go unnoticed or proceed unchecked, though. The dark beings of the north saw these disparate peoples and fiefdoms come together under Fleetfoot's patchwork kingdom. They, too, began to work together. In concert, they quickly had a chief among them, a bigger, badder beast that could rally the trolls, goblins, wraiths, wendigos, wights, and even fouler beings of shadow in the north. Word crept into Toybox Keep that Horagales, a god of the old times that the Sami knew well, was the one making the darkness coalesce. But they pushed against this, saying that Horagales was surely not coming against the Klaus. The rumors continued. Soon, they heard an old name. They heard that it was Ayeke. This, the Sami believed. All the beings, dark or otherwise, knew the being known as Ayeke, as great-grandfather. He was the progenitor of all the progenitors of the night. Fleetfoot openly wondered if this might be one of the fallen that had been struck down alongside Lucifer in the twilight of this world, or if this was a being of an even greater age, something born of the darkness of the before. Rumors persisted, as rumors do. They were substantiated by increasingly bold attacks on the peoples and beast fiefdoms outside the walls. These attacks even began to grow more frequent on the city itself. But it was not until Ravdna, the chief consort and lover of Horagales, came to the keep that Fleetfoot and his people began to prepare for war. Ravna showed up on a day when the Revantulet danced across the sky. The greens and blues and purples shimmered and snaked all along the firmament, and she showed up outside the great gates of the city. Ravna came clad in nothing but a cloak made of the hide of the last king of the Yakaru that had defied the old gods, and bearing great branches from a rowan tree, heavy with red berries that were her sigil. Springs of the greener bits of the rowan and many of the berries were woven through her white hair. It could not be called blonde. White gold was most fitting. It was a crown unto itself. If he hadn't seen it himself, Fleetfoot would not have believed that a woman's skin could be a paler white than a yakkaru's pelt. But Ravna's skin shone in the torchlight and reflected the Revontulet as if she were herself a living jewel. Fleetfoot was quick to ask his elven steward to fetch the dethroned queen of the Northern Reach some clothing. Her well-toned ivory body was distracting to him, and more than once he found his eyes straying to her nipples that stood out quite prominently, both because of the frigid air and because they were the only splash of color below her neckline, one dab of subtle winterberry pink amid the snows of her breasts. Thankfully, his steward was fast, and Ravna's eyes were enchanting. The latter meant that Fleetfoot was equally distracted by the shifting blues that he found there. More often, they were the near translucent blue of ice that is too thin to walk upon. But like the Revontulet, they changed, flitting between the blues of the glaciers, the heavy winter skies, the burningly cold snows. They were dangerously hypnotizing. Once Ravna's lean body was draped in the soft reds and greens and golds of the Sami, she told a tale of horror. Horagales was dead, as were his brethren who had ruled the north for so long. Ayeke had rallied the monsters of the north and pieced together his own growing kingdom, a kingdom of anger, and born in opposition to what they felt was disgusting joy and light that radiated from the Toy Box Keep and the hated King Sinterklaas. While Fleetfoot and his adopted family had made the North prosper and spent the majority of their time finding ways of making the children of the world happier, bringing them light in the darkest of times, and making the world at large even happier thereby, Ayeke had gathered the darkness that was in retreat because of this joy crafting. The great-grandfather had awoken when, in full challenge to the evil things of the world, the Klaus and his people had chosen Yuletide to bring the greatest kindnesses and gifts unto the world. The darkest time of the year, a time meant for death to creep cold across the lands of the Northern Hemisphere, and for the peoples of that world to cower in fear, was now a time of laughter and love, giving and grace, piety and ponderousness. The Klaus had done this as an affront to the order of the cosmos. Ayeke could not abide by this. On feeling the dark recede, on feeling the first warmth of good in the deepest reaches of the ice caves, he awoke, and he was disgusted. He was angry. Ravna had kept a straight face throughout her tale, but when she did quiet, she began to weep silently. Fleetfoot went to her then, and he let her lean into him. He held her. Though earlier he had wanted nothing more than to embrace this woman and become one with her in a worshipful celebration of her physical perfection, that was the furthest thing from his mind. He was naught but a friend and confidant. He realized that wasn't true either. He realized that, with Horagales dead, he was now her chosen king, her protector. When her crying slowed, she pushed away from him and handed him a note. The great-grandfather had left a note to Fleetfoot on her lover's mangled corpse. He opened the grisly, rust-splattered envelope to read.
Bishop of Myra. Yes, I know who you were. You have created imbalance in this world, across all worlds, with your blind generosity of spirit and giving of gifts. The world has come to need you, but the world has long needed me as well. I am coming for you, Bishop. Or is it Klaus, Ninorta, Serunios Sip, Atabai, Nuyalik, Woden, Sinterklaas, Nyanazagani, Saint Nicholas? Maybe your rustic, humbled Twilight Fleetfoot is your true name now. No matter, O King of ill-gotten lands, I am coming for you and your city of joy. I will turn it to a city of bones and despair. An altar to the need for balance on this plane. Prepare for my coming if you must. But know that I will smite you and all those who throw their lot in with you, with a fury not seen since before your God made his covenant with Enoch. He is that is. I am that is. I am coming.
So, those two cursed goblins were scouts. This was ill news indeed. Fleetfoot comforted Ravna as best he could, even with the sorcery of Aieke's words rasping through his head, the broken sticks and cracking ice and howling winds, all in a voice, all in the magic of Aieke's words. And then he tasked his elven guard to lend her extra protections, both magical and martial. Tonight, as the Revantulet would continue to dance its sensuous, winding glimmer, as the call went out to the king of the Poro, the Sami elders, the warlord of the wandering Yakkaru, the elven Kuningas, the Ahma chieftains, and all the others from their network of allies. The darkness was coming as the Yuletide approached. War was coming to Toybox Keep, and all the nightmares of the world would come to end all joy and light. He, who is the Klaus, the Bishop of Myra, Din Sinterklaas, Christkin dubbed Saint Nicholas, Yolaupoki, Twilight Fleetfoot, the chosen king of the peoples of the northern wastes, would not let this happen. Thank you for listening to Part 1, Toybox Keep, part of what I hope to be a series building into yet another novella called The Yuletide Wars. That does it for today's mini special of prose. I certainly hope you enjoyed it. All music and sounds you have heard come from YouTube's Free Music Library and freesound.org, or are of my own creation. Those used from the two websites are being used under CC 01.0 public domain dedication licenses. And that does it. So have a wonderful rest of your day. If you are a celebrator of Christmas, I hope you are enjoying said celebration. If you are not, I certainly hope you enjoyed this Christmassy short story. and will keep your eyes peeled for the future installments of the Yuletide Wars. As always, thank you all so very much for listening, and never forget to love those around you, tell them that you do, and embrace this life as it is, stranger than fiction.